welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 Hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari for the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. Make sure you are listening to him and Blake Silverman on the Pin Down on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel. You are obviously reading Omari Sankofa, the second on the Detroit Free Press. And please go subscribe to the Motor City Hoops Substack, which is absolutely free. Dropped in the Sar Thompson video today where I went back and watched the most recent 100 field goal attempts. And before we introduce one of our favorite, probably the favorite guests we have, I have a special thank you to all Pistons and especially Pistons Pulse listeners who were here before the Detroit Pistons were good. I did not have enough of appreciation for this before recently experiencing the gosh awful Kansas City Chiefs. And I realized that over the last 2 weeks, I have been unable to listen to a Chiefs podcast that I usually listen to religiously. And I realized it's because they suck. And so what that made me appreciate more was all of the Pistons fans who were still listening to us, even when the Pistons sucked for the first 4 years of Motor City Hoops and the first few years of the Pistons Pulse. Obviously, we love all of you. We thank all of you, but a special ode to all of you listeners, viewers, supporters when this team wasn't any good, because now I have even greater of appreciation. With that said, welcome, good friend Laz Jackson, to the Pistons Pulse.
I was going to tease you about the Chiefs, and now I just feel bad.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. It just hit me all of a sudden. I was like, why do I not want to listen to this podcast? I'm like, oh, it's because they're awful. And then it hit me, man, thank goodness for the Pistons fans who aren't like me and still came to listen to the Pistons Pulse and everything Detroit Bad Boys was doing and everything else, lads.
Yeah, no. And so I cut off the intro, but everybody already knows who I am. So it's fine.
No. Yes, we know you. We love you. We appreciate you. Let's get into this. We thought this was a natural kind of break in the season where we can kind of look at stuff in review and all of that. But first, I mean, I think this stuff is going to be hot and heavy moving forward because the Detroit Pistons are the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference and there are names out there. So as YouTube user brings up, I first want to go to you, O2, and then Laz, I want to get your thoughts on this because I know you tweeted about it. YouTube user says, O2, Sham said Detroit is expected to be interested in AD. I think the other teams that were mentioned were the Hawks and Raptors. Please tell me this is based purely on speculation and not sourced within the organization. So O2, your side of it, and then Laz will get your thoughts on it just in general.
Yeah, the Pistons have kind of been thrown around as an AD suitor. And I think that report from ESPN was today that the Pistons are one of 3 teams interested in making a move for him. From what I've gathered, I don't think the Pistons are eager to trade for AD, especially with what he's owed over the next 3 years. And I mean, if you're the Pistons, you're essentially in the best spot you could be in professional sports. You're good. You're number 1 in the East. Most of your rosters on rookie contracts or, just on not crazy veteran deals. And you don't have to do anything. You could just kind of wait and see how this plays out. The MO for the front office since the summer, really since the last trade deadline, is we're going to let this group, play it out and see what they could do because they've earned that. And they're 19-5. So they just don't really strike me as a team that's eager to give up any type of capital for AD or, ruin that pristine cap sheet with, $60 million on the books in a couple of years for a 34-year-old. Obviously a lot of time to play out before you get to that point. But I would be surprised to see them trade for AD. I think there's a lot of reasons why that seems a little far-fetched.
Laz, I saw you tweet about it. Obviously, it's a topic of conversation. Just, obviously O2 is the reporter of the bunch here, and he has just, what was your initial thoughts I do want to talk about this at least a little bit. What were your initial thoughts about AD, the potential, what would you send out, the fit, all of that?
Yeah, I can see why Rich Paul might be interested in floating the Detroit Pistons as an AD destination. I am less sure about why the Pistons would be interested in the Anthony Davis business. Like, don't get me wrong. Anthony Davis is a good player, but he's not as good as he's been in the past. He's owed a lot of money. The Shams report included, there was expectations of a contract extension that the numbers were eye-watering. And what you would have to part with if you're the Pistons, you would much rather part with for somebody younger, maybe slightly more cost controlled, maybe somebody on a rookie max or a post-rookie extension, something of that sort instead of the $60 million. But I understand like why the prospect of AD, right? The floor stretching, rim protecting big man, the Pistons like currently kind of don't have, or like Stu, like a allegedly much better version of Stu is what the Pistons would be acquiring in AD, but the cost is just probably too high. This is where like the second apron stuff kind of messes stuff up, because it was like, hey, like Tobias for AD, like straight up, or like Tobias and like Sasser for AD. You'd at least like have a meeting about it. You'd at least have to think about it. But with like needing to match AD's current salary, it just makes it untenable for the Pistons in my mind.
And he's also just not, like, if you look at what the Pistons are good at, not good at, like AD got to, like, you double down on your strengths and don't really address any of your weaknesses, especially when he insists on playing the 4 instead of the 5. And like, I just think he replicates everything you already do well and doesn't really address the one thing you need, which is outside shooting. So that's just my opinion. That's not like the reporting aspect of it. But what does he do for this team that they don't already have? Like, I'm just not sure why you would necessarily need to invest that much money when you're already a top rim protecting team and already score a lot of points in the paint. You're not really getting what you don't already have at that one.
Let me play this side. Take away everything else. Like, let's just say the money can work. You can get him, like, and you can be palatable with what the trade is. Let's not worry about an extension, Laz. Do you even see, because I see you guys made the comment, I see it in the chat, like, you already have Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart. Like, that's a great 48 minutes of center play. And not to mention B-Ball Paul and Stewart being able to play a little bit at the 4. But is there even an on-court argument? Like, hey, this might take you, you're not going to catch the Thunder, but could this solidify you as absolutely the second best defense in the NBA with adding Anthony Davis to these other guys? Is there an argument to, hey, if you're not sure, and we'll talk about this later, if Jalen Duren is absolutely the number 2 option, this gives you that guy. So let's eliminate the extension conversation, the trade parts, the injury thing, Laz. Is there even an on-court, he's healthy argument where this would make sense for you?
Yeah, absolutely. But that's a really big conditional.
Yeah, sure.
The Pistons like currently play a decent number of Duren Stu minutes, being able to rotate 3 bigs in and out, 3 bigs who like kind of all do different things at that point, a la like the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like, you can see why like that would be appealing. It would give them like, and again, like allegedly AD is like a little bit more of a floor spacer, especially if he's playing the 4. And that'd be an element that'd be like nice to have in like an additional part of. But that's a really big conditional you laid out, Bryce. And that in reality, that makes it tough for me to overlook.
So the only reason I wanted to do that is if we do get to a point where it does happen or potentially could happen, I do think then we would be talking about what is the actual on-court reason. I don't know what AD's trade market is going to be. And at the end of the day, just matching the salaries, as you said, is going to be problematic. I mean, it starts with Tobias Harris, probably Karras, and then you're going to have to add in somebody else. And then what are the actual assets, whether that's a young player or a draft pick or whatever? I think the biggest thing for me is I could almost palate the contract if it wasn't with the extension, right? Like, there's no way I'm fading for that dude and then giving the extension. Bo knows 2K here. Thank you so much for the super chat. We appreciate you. Says, first time joining the live, missed the beginning. I'm biased here, but I would go back and listen to the beginning because I thought it was pretty good. It's probably one of my best intros. Sorry, Laz, for kind of squashing your introduction here. But they say, I don't think Trajan is silly enough to engage AD talks. I'd imagine it's just Shams drumming up hype to encourage other teams to make offers for AD. Laz, I don't think it's Shams. I think Shams tweets what is text to him a lot of times. I would say this is AD's agent trying to drum up interest and fill out the market. And when these things are reported, it's always important to think, who does it make the most sense for? It doesn't make sense for the Detroit Pistons to let people know that they were interested in Anthony Davis. That doesn't make any sense at all from the Detroit perspective. O2, any other thoughts on AD? Laz, I'll let you get anything else in before we move on. O2, real quick, anything from you?
No, I mean, that's pretty much it. It's one of those things where on his face, it doesn't make sense. And, I could just add the reporting aspect to it and say to my knowledge, they haven't had any discussions regarding AD. So still a lot to play out, but for the reasons we talked about, that doesn't seem like something that's likely to happen this season.
Laz, anything for you to finish off before we get it into?
No, I really just think this is Rich Paul, just listing some teams.
Yeah. Okay. So we are 24 games in. As you said, Omari, this team is 19-5. They are B-ball reference. It depends on if you go there, NBA.com, but they're 6th in net. They're 9th in offense, 3rd in defense. Right there, they always kind of bounce around 2nd, 3rd, 4th, all of that. We'll get into some of those other things. Laz, give us our, the mile high view, the airplane view, whatever you want to say it. Let's not get into specific players yet. 24 games in. What are your thoughts?
This team, the winning streak was huge, and I think gave them a lot of proof of concept. This team still has played and won a lot of close games, but the sign of a truly elite team like your Oklahoma City Thunder is that you're not playing close games. You're winning by 15 every night. And this team isn't quite there yet. And so that is the thing. That is one of the things I am keeping my eye on with this team as we move into the end of December, the beginning of January. It's can this team get out of some of these close games? Can they stop letting teams back into games in the second half? Or can they stop playing from behind to catch some teams that perhaps that they on paper are better than, and from a record perspective are better than? That's something I'd like to just keep my eye on especially as we got this West Coast trip coming up.
Real quick, since you brought it up, the Thunder have played 10 clutch games, or played in 10 clutch games. The Pistons have played in 17, but it's worth noting Oklahoma City has a 41.4 net rating in their 10 games that they've played in the clutch. The Pistons are second in the NBA with a 28 net rating. The Thunder don't count. I throw their stuff out, but Detroit is second in terms of clutch rating. The offense is 130, which is 3rd, and the defense is 10th. So it's actually, the defense hasn't been bad, but it's almost been the offense that has carried them in clutch moments. O2, you always bring up the Cade Cunningham 4th quarter scoring numbers and all of that. So I think that's a good transition into Cade. O2, where have you been on his play? I will quickly say Sam and I recently did our quarter of the year All-NBA. I had Cade Cunningham first team All-NBA. He was 5th behind the likes of the 4 you would imagine: Shea, Jokic, Luka, Giannis, and I put Cade 5th over Anthony Edwards, Jalen Brunson, and some of those guys. So where have you at in terms of Cade Cunningham? Not that specifically, but just his play through these first games.
He's doing it all. He's getting it done in so many different ways, whether it's the late scoring some nights or, the nights where he's got 15 assists and, 5 shot attempts at halftime, and he's just getting people going. He's just done it in so many ways. And I think the consistency has really stood out, to the point to where I thought in their loss against Milwaukee last Wednesday, I thought that might have been his first just outright not good game, maybe since the first week. He's had, this stretch pretty much from the second week up until that game where every single night, especially in the 4th, they're not winning that game, without him stepping up in the ways that he has. Of course, he gets Eastern Conference Player of the Month for the games in October and November, they went 15-2 in November, and they won the first 13 of those before they lost a couple toward the end. Yeah, I think he's just been the full package for him through the first 20, 25 games of the season. He's done it for him offensively, defensively, clutch, playmaking, whatever you want to see. He's shown you can adjust in a moment and give them what they need on any given night.
I think the crazy thing to me is he's 130% from the 3-point line right now, and he's still at 27.5 points. We know the creation. We know the rebounding. We know, I always make the argument to, defensively in terms of the usage he has. Offensively always stands out to me. Laz, what stands out to you with Cade Cunningham so far, and maybe something you're watching for Cade now over the next 50 plus games and into the playoffs?
Yeah, you brought up the first thing I was going to bring up, Bryce, was that he's doing all this and he's still shooting under 30% from 3 somehow. And he's putting up, I think, 6 or 7 a game, which is a good number, a fine number. But I personally, as a fan, I'm always I don't know if Cade wanted to take some of those threes. He's kind of just taking those to keep defenses honest. I think that's important, but like you'd still like to see them go in at a slightly higher clip. And that's part of the reason why his effective field goal percentage is under 50% right now, which is again, like just wild that he's this productive and this talented and this elite for this team. And like statistically, it's kind of having like a relatively like subpar year from an efficiency standpoint, but that's buoyed a little bit by the free throw attempts. He's up to almost 8 free throw attempts a game. That's like a 2.5 free throw attempts more than he was like last season. You see a lot more respect from the referees, from his perspective. That's a key for efficiency. That was something that I've been on him in the past. So I'm really happy to see, that improve now. Then the third thing I'll say is that he's still a good, not great finisher around the rim. He's a good finisher like in the paint, but when he gets all the way to the rim, you can still see like guys still send a shot back. That's why it's a big reason why the extra free throws are so important. It's because like now those attempts are turning into points instead of just like going back the other way. And with him kind of like lying on the floor, like wondering what happened. But yeah, like Omari mentioned, there are nights where he's like shot 7 times in the first half and he's just like getting everybody involved and like keeping the team in it. And to me, that's the sign of just like a guy who's really like mastered what he wants to accomplish on a basketball court. I've been really impressed with Cade, and I think there's still more to get to from an efficiency standpoint. So is a 30-point per game Cade like in the cards? Like it's on the table to me.
So his true shooting is right about where it was last year, but it has to do with what you brought up. His free throw rate is the biggest jump when you just look at kind of like the quote unquote advanced numbers. Like it's not even close whenever you look across the board. You know, a lot of these numbers are very similar, but that free throw rate has just, I don't want to say skyrocketed, but it's significant compared to very noticeable. And the other thing I will say is the turnover percentage is actually down from last year. It's the lowest of his career if you take out the shortened sophomore season when he only played 12 games. Real quick, just your thoughts on his defense. I always come on here and I don't want to say I defend his defense, but I do think sometimes I'm higher than others on his defense whenever you give the context of the offensive load he takes and then comparing that to other players around the league that have similar offensive usage. I find him to be at the very least neutral, if not a plus defender considering his offensive role. Do you agree with that? Or were you with others where it's maybe just straight up neutral to not even that?
I think neutral is a fair characterization. But like when you add on the load he has to take on offensively for this team, when you add on the fact that like most nights he's in the starting lineup as like the heliocentric primary ball handler for this team. They get lineups in there with him with like another guy who can handle, but like there's been inconsistencies among those guys with their play, and so like you don't know if you can rely on Karras or Jaden Ivey to, you know, be the guys that we thought they were going to be coming into the season. And so really all of it does fall on him. So yes, like I think like adequate is fair, but like that is still really, really impressive when you consider that, you know, it'd be really hard to have the second or third best defense in the league with a weak spot, like a Jalen Brunson or like a Trae Young, a guy who like classically like teams have to game plan around, defensively. And so Cade being neutral is a really big part of like why they don't have to do that and why they're second or third in defense.
Especially when you already have a negative defender on the floor in Duncan Robinson, who we all know is so important offensively. 0-2, let's go to break. When we come back, I think it's time to talk about Jalen Duren. You can give your quick thoughts on Duren thus far, and then obviously we'll get Laz's thoughts on him as well.
All right. We are back with segment 2. Let's go ahead and get into Jalen Duren. He was averaging 18.8, 11.5 rebounds. You know, that's probably been their second best all-around player this season when you just look at sheer impact. I mean, we've talked about him on the pod a lot. You know, I've, of course, like anybody else, just been impressed with the ball handling leap he's had this season, you know, where he's kind of gone from, you know, can occasionally take guys off the dribble to like if you're an opposing sitter, like that he's got any type of, you know, speed or, you know, strength advantage against, which is like 99% of NBA centers, you know, he's probably going to go right at you. You know, so I think you couple that with the improved defense. There were a couple games over the last week and a half where I thought he could have been more aggressive. And, I think some of that was just, I don't think he was able to get to the pick and roll lobs that he typically gets with Cade in just a few games just because of the defense. And I don't know if that had a factor in it. Laz, I really want to hear your thoughts on Duren. They've heard from me, but a lot to be impressed with, obviously, so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I've also been really impressed with Duren. The thing that has impressed me the most is that ball handling improvement, is that ability to attack guys with like a face-up dribble, which is it's like something, again, we saw him experiment with in the past, but those experiments like weren't fruitful. And so it was a matter of like whether or not this would be a thing. The other thing that I'll mention is the free throw attempts. Like, again, he is another guy who is helping this half-court offense stay afloat by like on those drives, on those attempts. He's getting fouled. He's getting whacked because you have to foul him to stop him. And he's making his free throws at a pretty good clip, which hasn't always been the case in his career. He's kind of been uneven from the free throw line overall in his career. But this year is contributing to that 18 points a game. I would like to see him do more if that's even a thing. I would like to see them start to stagger Cade and Duren a little bit. If Duren is going to be this useful and have like this many ways, have a diversity of ways he can attack on defense. It's like, let him out there with like some bench lineups and see if he can keep them afloat offensively and defensively. Like, I know the rhythm that Bickerstaff has established is like pretty set in stone, right? Like with the bigs, especially because Stu is so valuable to this team. You don't want to like curtail his minutes. And fans have complained about the rotations. I've complained about the rotations. And so to have like another rotational nitpick on top of everything is kind of is a bit much. But like, that is one thing I'd be curious to see if they start experimenting with, is some like non-Cade Duren minutes.
So just looking at some of his growth, because that's kind of what we're talking about here. The free throw rate, like we talked about Cade's jumping, Duren's has really jumped. I had a tweet recently at that time. I believe this was Saturday. This was December 6th. Jalen Duren is 9th in the entire NBA, not just bigs, not guys over a certain height, the entire NBA in free throw attempts per 100 possessions for people who had played at least 12 games. That's crazy, guys. 9th in the entire league. And this dude is getting to the free throw line at that rate. I will say the usage has really jumped. The number looks that way. I've kind of mentioned the turnovers recently, and I've seen other people as well. The turnover percentage is actually down, which I think is encouraging that his usage has gone up, but the turnover percentage hasn't. So his turnovers are only up because he's being asked to do so much more. Two numbers I really watch for here with him, Laz. Where does the free throw percentage hit? Because if that all of a sudden falls back to the 60s, like we've seen it 2 different times in his career, that free throw stuff doesn't matter quite as much, right? Because you're not making them anyway. And that assist turnover stuff, like, can he create a little bit more, specifically if they go to some of the lineups you're talking about? We've seen him be a creator, but for some reason right now, the assist per game, the assist percentage, that stuff isn't showing up, at least in the box scores.
Yeah. I think some of that is because we're seeing so much Cade usage. A lot of what the Pistons want to do is get teams to put 2 on the ball with Cade and have Duren kind of play out of the short roll in 4-on-3 and have him like attack smaller guys and help. When he's doing that, like instead of passing it off to Asar in the dunker spot or Tobias on the wing or in the corner, like right now he's just going through guys. So it's like I'm fine with that process. I think like if teams start changing up what they do defensively, like I trust him at this point to kind of turn that dial back to passing and get back to distributing if the game calls for it.
So MC313, where are most of JD's shots coming from? Where would you say he is as a shot creator? I mean, I think that's been his biggest jump, to be quite honest, is like being able to go get his own, like catch in the middle of the floor and attack. If you just look solely at where the percentage of his shots come from, we all know this. It's still 10 feet and in. There's no 3-pointers. There's not even really what you would call long mid-range or even like middle mid-range, I guess. But there is a significant jump in the percentage of his field goal attempts from 3 to 10 feet. And I do think that is one of his biggest growths, O2, is the non-dunk stuff, the ability to knock down an 8-footer. Someone brought up the baseline spin and little fadeaway. I think it's that growth from 3 to 10 feet for Jalen Duren, whether off the bounce or off the catch, where it's allowed him to catapult into this almost 20-point-a-game guy, O2.
Yeah, it's just another wrinkle to his game that defenses have to account for. They're already trying to dial in on that lob and not, give up as easy buckets that they've been giving up. But it just changes things a bit when you have a guy in the short row who's looking to keep it a score a bit more than he's looking to pass. I think that he did last year and the year before. And oftentimes it's the right decision because, he's knocking down some of those shots from 9, 10 feet out, like even some from 14 or 15 feet this season. Like you said, the handle's been really good. The footwork has been really good. He's somebody that just turned 22 last month, and you're starting to see him kind of grow into his body a bit more, kind of understand, I'm bigger and I'm stronger than these guys. It's already at the point, if he gets the ball into the dunker spot, it doesn't matter how many guys are in the paint, he's probably going to get that dunk off one way or another. So you're just stacking additional skills on top of that. And it makes you wonder where he can go from there. I think the assist numbers are a bit down this season. To your point, Laz, can he do more? If he's shown he can do this, maybe he could be more of a main creator type guy. With certain guys go to the bench, Cade sits, maybe, you have a Dennis, J.I. backcourt, and, Duren could be right there with those guys handling some of the playmaking reps. So that's really what it demonstrates to me is, if this is what he's doing in year 4 and it's such a big leap forward, to me it indicates that there's more that's going to come. And it's just a question of when do you begin to add that to his plate now that he's showing that he can handle some of what you're giving him now.
One other player that I absolutely wanted to get your thoughts on, Laz, and we'll have a little bit of time to get to some others before we do big picture team stats and see how real we think those things are, is, of course, Ausar Thompson. Shameless plug. I did the video breakdown over on the Substack, dropped that this afternoon. I went back to watch the last 100 field goal attempts from Ausar Thompson and just broke down, how was he getting shots? What shots do I think he should get more of? What should he lean into? Et cetera, et cetera. Listen, I feel like sometimes we overlook Ausar Thompson's defense now because we just know it's so good and we start to talk about his offense right away. Again, over on Game Theory, I had him as a first team all NBA, all defense guy. Can't remember if Sam had him first team or right there on second team. Either way, this is an all defense level defender. You can start there, Laz, but then I do want to get your thoughts on his offense. If you've seen any growth, what you're looking for with Ausar.
Yeah, he's the same guy he was before, which is an elite level defensive player. He still covers so much space so quickly, which really helps this team. This team wants to score in the paint and prevent you from scoring in the paint. And having a guy like Ausar be able to fly back out to the perimeter to contest shots and, come into the perimeter to help challenge shots at the rim is just, it makes the defense hum when he's on the floor in my mind. So yeah, he's been really impressive on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, I've had some questions. It feels like his involvement in the offense has not been consistent on a night to night. Bryce, I haven't seen the Substack post yet. I was doing some work. I want to get to it, but I would be curious how long did it take him to get to 100 field goal attempts? How many games did it take?
Oh, so it went in reverse order. I'm trying to think if I just look at the game log, what was the last game I went back to? I feel like it was the Utah game is where I had to go back to.
And that's
is that right?
That's a couple ago.
That was 100. So that was on November 5th. Yeah. So a little over a month
ago. He's averaging less than 10 shots a game. And it's tough to, when he's not being aggressive and it's when he starts to pick his spots, there are teams, you can start to see teams kind of sit on the things he wants to do offensively. The guys have started to sit on that spin move into the 8 to 10 foot mid-range jumper. Some of the baseline cut activity we haven't seen as much of. And, maybe some of that you can attribute to the fact Duren is plowing through healthy fits like we talked about. Maybe some of that is the fact that for a big stretch, they didn't have Tobias Harris. And so there wasn't as much shooting just on the floor in general. And so it's everything's just more congested and it's a lot harder to make those cuts be timely and have them come in the right place when everyone is a little more compact defensively. But yeah, his offensive involvement on a consistent basis is something I would like to see a little bit more of. we started out the year as the backup point guard, and now he's kind of not. And it's like, he's kind of searching for what his role means offensively. Sorry, Bryce, I cut you off. I saw you make.
No. I just wanted to just hammer the point home with what you brought up. I hadn't truly looked at this. He's played exactly 20 games. He missed 4 games in between. So we have 10 and 10. He averaged 11.4 field goal attempts over the first 10 games of the season, just straight field goal attempts, 11.5. And then he's averaged 7.4 over this next 10. So, I mean, it plays right. The stats bear out exactly what you're saying there, Laz, in terms of just not getting quite as much. And I do think that it's important to bring up the ball handling thing, because that was a big thing that was talked about coming into the year, and it hasn't really played out after that initial stretch. We haven't seen it as much with the play of Dennis Jenkins. Karras does it a little bit. Obviously, J.I.'s now. Even Jalen Duren, right? Taking some of that usage is going to take it away from him. The one thing I will say is I still think he can be a very high level off the ball finisher, transition, all of that. And again, the defense is just so good. I never want us to lose sight of that. O2, your thoughts on Ausar and kind of what we've seen. And I still feel like conversation is geared a little bit more offensive than defensive.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you guys have said, what Laz said. The defense, yeah, I mean, when he's on the floor, it's kind of like having 2 defenders out there. It feels like sometimes, just because of, just not the accuracy of his reads, but how quickly he makes them, and how a lot of times it's actually just him beating guys to their own spots. So he kind of stops a lot of things from happening before that, they could even unfurl. There's a lot of stuff he does out there that disrupts other teams, individually, from a team standpoint, but he's almost a defense unto himself sometimes, just because of the amount of stuff he does every single possession that just kind of adds up. So I really can't say enough positive things, for him on the defensive end. Offense has been a little bit more up and down. The involvement's been a bit more up and down, where, the ball hasn't been in his hands as much. I think what happens is when you start off with the ball in your hands this season, and then you miss a few games, and then Dennis gets going. So, when you come back, now Dennis is handling the ball a bit more. And then J.I. comes back, and then you got to get him some ball handling reps. And now there's just, a list of guys who are all getting their hands on the ball. And Ausar naturally is going to, just pick his spots. He's not somebody who's looking to dominate the ball anyway. So I think some of that's just rotational rogue, just adjustment in the middle of the season, where guys are all just trying to figure out exactly how they slot in. So 24 games, I think Ausar has played 20. I feel like we got 10 games of him more in that primary role, and then, 10 games of the aftermath of him, just sharing with some other guys. And, that's led to some mixed performances. I know he had a stretch where he didn't attempt. Last week in Portland was his first time attempting more than 10 shots since he initially came back from that injury, which, again, just shows that he's had to share the ball a bit more. I like his mid-range jumper. I don't think it's going in much more, but I think he's taking it more than he has in the past. I looked up the numbers of cleaning the glass the other week, and he is leaning on that mid-range a bit more. Looks good. I think, he's getting it off probably the cleanest he's gotten it off, just in his 3 years in the league. Like I said, he's been taking more of them. I think that's what the defense gives him a lot of nights, and just the willingness to take it is a step forward for him. If you're not going to be a shooting threat, from 3 or at the line, and it's got to come from somewhere. And that's probably just one development in this game that I think is encouraging and can help him out moving forward.
One last plug. I talked about that mid-range shot a lot in the video breakdown. Laz, we got a few more minutes here, and then I do want to get to the team stats stuff. I'll give you the floor. Who do you want to talk about? Or you can try to get multiple guys in. We haven't talked Duncan Robinson, not a whole lot about Stu, Dennis, Ron Holland, J.I. has played 9 games now. A lot of different ways you could go, but is there one of these guys that has really stood out in a positive or negative way, or one of these guys you're really kind of just got your eyes on after this little initial break and then they get back into the season?
So, you guys know I'm back in Detroit. I've been to a couple games this season. I got some season tickets. The crowd loves Ron Holland, and it's really easy to see why. There have been multiple games already where his energy in the second half has been maybe not like the difference between a win and a loss, but like very heavily contributed to winning basketball. He started to like pick up a little bit from the perimeter as a 3-point shooter. That's been really good to see. The confidence is good to see, like regardless of the shots are going in or not. And then what was the streak? He had like, is the streak still ongoing where he has like 15 games with the steal in a row or something like that?
I think so, yeah.
He's making an impact defensively like every single time he steps on the court. There is going to be like with all the rotation stuff, it's easy to be like, oh, like we're playing 12 guys, like who like the shuffle is just too much. It was I think for a couple of games, you did kind of see Ron lose what he was supposed to be doing offensively. But I'm glad to see he's gotten it back. And there have been just a couple of plays he's made in the Portland game, and then the Atlanta game, especially, where it's just like, this is like he's 20, he's 21. Like this is a really special kid. And like he's coming like sooner rather than later. It's just like another guy for this team that's arriving soon.
He had a stretch where he didn't score in double digits for quite a few games. And, I was even a little bit hard on him because it was in the stretch where guys were out. And I thought, oh, this is going to be our chance to see Ron Holland almost like primary scoring option type of stuff. And it almost threw him out of his role and his rhythm. And then we've seen over the last, it's still been a little up and down, but he scored double digits, 3 of his last 5. 2 of those, he scored 17. He just didn't make shots against Milwaukee, but he still got 8. He shot 6, 8, 10, 11, 8 times. Again, he just didn't make shots against Milwaukee. So I think he's kind of fell back into that. And you're absolutely right in terms of the energy. I will give this one stat per 100 possessions. Guys that have played at least 10 games, let's go. David Jones Garcia has played 10. So we'll go 11 games. He's 4th in the NBA in steals per 100 possessions. Like he has been very disruptive. I think his like just sheer point of attack defense in terms of the matchups he can take. He's not a star. Like not many guys are. But I feel pretty good. Like, oh, a star's not on the floor. Ron Holland can take this matchup now. And I feel pretty decent about that. So I think he's shown a lot of growth and I'm still excited about maybe he doesn't, I don't know, it's year 2. Maybe he doesn't get to that offensive level, like the Jalen Brown, super, super high ceiling outcome that, you really had, I'm not saying you, but that people had hoped for or talked about. But to me, he absolutely looks like a real NBA rotation wing / forward. And the energy of how he plays, as you guys have mentioned, really stands out. Anybody else you want to mention real quick? Give a quick shout out one way or the other.
Yeah, the other guy I was going to bring up was Jaden Ivey. Still kind of finding his footing. The lows have been really, really low. The lows have been lower than I would like, which has not been great. But the highs have been fine, right? And I'm giving him the grace. Like this is an entirely new role for him coming off the bench, and it's not like there have been lineups with like him and Karras where like neither one of them is playing well. There have been 3-guard lineups with like Danis, Karras, and Ivy, where like allegedly Danis is like the best perimeter defender, but like those lineups have really struggled on defense, to my eyes at least. And so I want to give Jaden Ivey a little bit more time, but the early results, like 10 games in, not super duper encouraging. But like, again, like he probably just needs a couple more games.
Yeah, I'm trying to give him a few more games as well, but I think I share that sentiment with you. Let's go to break. When we come back, O2, I want to talk some of these team stats things, and we'll see how real are the Pistons this good in some of these areas? Are the Pistons this bad in some of these areas? And I'll get your guys' thoughts on that. We'll get into those right after this.
All right, we are back with segment 3. Wes has some nice numbers here for us, as he always does, and I'm just going to review sort of the statistical overview for where the team is, and I guess more broadly how real this is. So
hold on, let me go one at a time. I want to get your guys' thoughts.
For sure.
Okay, O2. All right. So first and foremost, this team is 19-5, which Wes says, and I will trust his math, is about a 65 win pace. O2, do you think the Pistons are a 65 win team right now?
65 is a high number. I think that would be, I don't know if the best Pistons team won 65. Like that would be around the best records they've ever had. I don't know if I'm quite there yet. That's a big number. So I'm going to say no.
Laz?
I'm going to agree with Omari. I would So before the season, I was like, I'd be happy with like 44. Now, like with the winning streak, I think that you could easily raise that to like 50, 55, but 60 is definitely pushing it. Like 60, you have to beat like everyone else in the East consistently. And like, that's something I think they're capable of doing that I don't expect it.
The 05-06 team won 64 games. That's the best Pistons team in history. And then the other 61 team in franchise history was the 88-89 team. They won 63 games. And then the 07-08 team won 59, and they were tied with 89-90. So you're talking championship teams or like Eastern Conference finals teams. Yeah, or finals teams, yeah.
And that I will say, like, none of the rest of the Eastern Conference has impressed me to this point. And we've gotten to a point where, like, before the season, I was like, all right, just like get home court in the playoffs. Now we're at a point where it's like, I think making the conference finals, maybe not winning the conference finals, but making it there is definitely like a reasonable goal for this team to have at this point in time of the season.
Yeah, I'd say I think 50 wins is all of a sudden now like a real, like, because even if they went 500 the rest of the way, they would win 48 games. So I do think, yeah, so as Agrodome says, the winning streak meant play 500 the rest of the way, 50 plus wins. I think 50 plus is a somewhat reasonable expectation now, whenever you put it in the context of going 500 the rest of the way puts you at 48 or right around there. Okay, offensively, they are currently 8th in points per game. I mentioned earlier, they are 9th in offensive rating. Laz, I'll start with you. Do you think that this team is actually that good on the offensive end for an 82 game stretch?
During the regular season, yes. Absolutely. Because they create a lot of those offensive points in transition. I think they're like the 3rd or 4th best transition team. Yeah. In the league from a production standpoint, like they average the 3rd or 4th most points in transition in the league. That's really big. And I think that's something that plays to their advantage in the regular season, right? We talk about Asar and Ron causing steals, talk about, Stu getting blocks and that causing runouts. We talk about even like a guy like Jaden Ivey's return, like really pushing the pace in some of these minutes. And so like, yeah, I think it's really important that they continue to like do this because it keeps them afloat offensively. The half-court offense has been good. And the half-court offense has actually been better, if I remember correctly, over like the last like 7 or so games. But like the transition offense is what really keeps them afloat and makes them like a top 5 offense.
O2, is this a team that can stay top 10 in offense, points per game, offensive rating, whatever people subscribe to measure this? You think this is something they'll do all season?
I think they can sustain it. They strike me a bit more like top 12 than top 10 just because I think it's hard to just dominate teams in the paint and sustain top 10 while not being that strong a 3-point shooting team for 82 games. Like I wouldn't be surprised if there's some slippage there unless they pick up the 3-point shooting, but they make up for it in other ways. And like, again, the transition scoring, the turnovers they create, the lead opportunities on the other end, like all that stuff's going to continue, so I could see them staying within the range that they're in now.
I will say, I think in the season, I think once all 82 games are played, I will guess that they are outside the top 10 in offensive rating, barring what the move at the deadline is. I think there is not even a big swing at the deadline, but I think there are moves that could be had at the deadline that could keep them in the top 10. I will just say this, guys, if they are truly a top 10 offense, and they are truly a top 5 defense, which we're about to talk about, and maybe better, that's like a real team. That's like a real playoff.
That's an Eastern Conference Finals team.
That's absolutely what we're talking about there. So as I mentioned earlier, kind of depends if you look at B-Ball Reference, NBA.com, and what day you look. This is a top 3, 4, 5 defensive rating, sometimes second. Is that real? Essentially, do you think they are one of the best defenses in the NBA, Laz? Take Oklahoma City is unquestionably the best defense in the NBA. We don't need to talk about it. It's stupid, silly how good they are. Is Detroit in the next tier of defenses in this league?
So you can make a very clear argument that the Pistons are the best defensive team in the Eastern Conference. And so, yes, like the answer is yes, right? We thought Cleveland would enter like that realm of conversation. They've been really inconsistent lately and like they've had injuries as well, but they just haven't been as good on defense as we thought. The other good teams in the conference are more like offensively inclined just in general. Miami plays like an insane pace. Orlando is allegedly like supposed to be good at defense, but like some of the intensity that was there in past seasons is kind of missing. I don't know why. It just kind of is. New York always has the weakness of their two best players are like average to below average defensively. And I think they're doing a good job to be as good defensively as they are, but you still don't like expect them to be like an amazing defensive team. So yeah, I mean, like their real competition in that area, I think, is Atlanta. And Atlanta's a team that they've already played really well, but Atlanta without Porzingis in the lineup is really like missing the ability to protect the rim in the way that like the Pistons currently do. Atlanta is much more of like take as many threes as you want. Like we're just going to contest them, or like we're going to be disruptive on the perimeter, rather than a like you're not going to score at the rim type of team.
O2, your thoughts? Is this a team that, you know, as Laz says, maybe that's the best way to say it, because you're talking about the Rockets being above them, the Warriors defensively above them, potentially. You know, I think the Magic are real competition. The Hawks, I agree with you, Laz. We'll see what it looks like when Trae Young starts playing again and where that defensive rating goes.
That's a good point.
Then Miami still has Bam, and you know Toronto's been good defensively as well. But O2, is this a top 5 defense? Let's just set it there.
Yeah, and I'm more bullish on them finishing the season top 5 in defense than I am top 10 in offense. Just because they don't really have a defensive weakness. You know, you've got one of the best rim protectors in the league and Isaiah Stewart, who he was great last season and he's been even better this season. So yeah, truly elite at the rim. Lassar, we've talked about him, but just those two guys alone, I think just gives you such a high baseline. You know, just being arguably two of the top 5 defensive players in the entire conference, you know, if not even higher. I mean, you've got Dyson in that group. You've got some other guys who are that level of defense, but not too many guys have two guys on that level like the Pistons have with Lassar and Isaiah Stewart. And then you have so many, you know, players who are someone the neutral to positive but can rise to that level, like JD, like Cade. You know, so that's 4 of your 5 starters who are good to elite on defense. And then you've got Duncan, who, you know, tries, and he tries very hard to not be a negative on that end. And the 3-point shooting, I think, more than outweighs what you're losing on defense with him. So, I mean, yeah, then the bench, like Javonte Green, Dennis, like Paul Reed, you know, those are guys who come in and really hustle. And Ron, obviously, like 4 guys who can just come in, and sometimes they just have like this super disruptive just synergy. But you know, when 3 or 4 of those guys run the court at once and they're all kind of dialed in. Yeah, from top to bottom, they've just got difference makers on that end. You know, they've got the attitude, like everything you want in a top 5 defense, they more or less have. So I think they'll stay there.
Yeah, I think I agree for a lot of the points you guys made. I agree, especially Omari with, I would bet more money on them staying top 5 in defense than top 10 in offense. But I think it's because you have 2 elite defenders in Stu and Lassar. And then I think the rest of the roster is littered with at least quality defenders. And I'm glad you brought up like even the deep depth of a Paul Reed is a, you know, impactful defender in terms of stocks, and Javonte Green. So I think I'm with that. Laz, this team is currently 2nd in free throw attempts per game, 3rd in free throw rate, 5th in free throw attempts per field goal attempts. The sad part is they're 29th in percentage, which kind of sucks. But is this sustainable? I mean, we always complain, you know, it's Detroit versus everybody, and I get it. I understand it, but there's some level of getting calls right now, or maybe it's just the fact that Detroit has said, no, you're going to give us calls because we're going to pressure the paint at this way. Just to give the raw numbers real quick, this is Cade at just under 8, Duren at just under 7, and then you are littered with Asar, Tobias, like all of those guys get there 2 or 3 times a game. Is this going to last throughout the regular season in terms of free throw attempts?
I don't think so. I was surprised to hear you say that. I do think that, like, yes, the style that they play where they're pressuring the paint, they're attacking the rim, like lends itself to more fouls getting called and getting to the free throw line more often. But like without a lead guy getting there like 10, 11 times a game, I think it's hard to say like, yes, they're going to stay a top 5 free throw attempt team. I know fouls are up like across the league. It's been kind of a point of contention raised on like on a national level. And so I do wonder if some of that's just like the Pistons are a team that fouls a lot and they get fouled a lot. And so it's just like there's a lot of like just refereeing happening in Pistons games. And maybe that settles down a little. But yeah, no, this team does not strike me as a team that draws that many fouls. So I was surprised to hear you say that. I don't think it continues.
I think I agree. O2, your thoughts? You think they can stay second in free throw attempts? Even looking at it, like, it's not like there's a few teams that are right behind them, the Blazers and the Lakers, but then it does drop off to 26, so they're like 2.5 more than 8th place. So it's not like some weird quirk where they're just barely above 10th place and could drop all the way down. But yeah, do you think they can stay as high as top 2 or 3, Omari, in free throw attempts?
Yeah, like Laz said, because free throws are up across the board, like that kind of lends you to think that there may be some noise there. But then, as you mentioned, like, there's enough of a disparity that, there's been a consistent trend. I could see them being top 5 or 6. I don't know if they necessarily stay at number 2 just because they don't necessarily have, free throw merchants, as they like to say, you don't have a Shea, you don't have the guys who could get 15, 16 a night, once a week or so. But their style of play, like, I just feel like they just have such a chaotic defense that their games just tend to have a lot of contact. Like, they play inside a lot. It just seems like they just attract officiating that just has a lot of calls on both sides. Like, I feel like that's like part of it. It could just be like a psychological thing with the refs where it's like, it's the Pistons and, that they're going to be throwing guys around the court and this and that. So, I just think they get a lot of calls because of that. It's not necessarily a play style thing. It's just more of like it's a Pistons game. So that's just kind of how it's going to go. I feel like all their 7 p.m. games have gone to like almost 10 p.m. Like, I feel like it's just, the games are so much longer this season. So it doesn't surprise me that they're number 2, even though it does. But I feel like they're probably more like 5 or 6. I'd be curious to see if that kind of evens out as we go through the year.
I've noticed guys be a lot more vocal at the refs this year. Kade's been a lot more vocal with the refs this year. I've seen a couple of like Tobias outbursts at refs for calls and non-calls. There's just like not something you saw at all last year. And so like, I wonder if some of that plays a role as well. Like, maybe as they've won games, as they've had a streak, like as they've had this profile, it's like you get to yell at the refs a little bit more if you win.
So I think I'm with you guys. I think it will slowly, go the other way. But listen, they attack the rim a lot. So, and you're going to get calls that way. The other thing, that's what I was going to say, is I don't watch the games live, so I don't notice the length of the games as much as others do, because I just fast forward through a lot of that stuff. And so I always start the games late or watch after the games are already over. And I have noticed that it does change my perspective on things, because a lot of times I'll even fast forward through free throws. I don't need to watch Cade shoot free throws. I can look at the score and tell whether he made them or not. So I do miss some of that. Okay, let's get through these last few a little bit quicker. Don't have to be one word answer, yes or no, but one more positive. This team is currently 2nd in blocks, 5th in steals, and 3rd in opponent turnover percentage just in general. That is all to say this defense is insanely disruptive. Laz, does that continue? And let's just say, we talk about defense in general, but is this a top 5 defensive disruption team in the NBA?
Yeah, I think you can say that will safely continue. That's again, like a byproduct of the guys we talked about, Asar and Stu and Ron in cases, Cade with the chase down block, like once a night. Duren has been a lot better about like glass cleaning and getting out in transition in that way, more than like a stocks perspective. But like, yeah, there's absolutely a thing that like I think will continue.
I think the coaching staff like has leaned into it and prioritizes it and all of that as well. O2, is this a top 5 defensive disruption team along with just being a top 5 defense in general?
Yeah, they've got a few outlier guys when it comes to that stuff, like Stu blocking shots. I think he has 5 or 6 games with like at least 4 blocks this season. Like Ron, Ron and Asar are like 2 of the top 5 producers of steals in the entire league. So that alone is going to create a lot. Yeah, like eye test numbers, like I think everything points to them being top 5 all season. That's just how they play. It works for them. They're going to keep doing it.
Okay, we're going to end with some negative things. I think that's okay. We've been very positive throughout the episode. They are 28th in 3-point attempts per game. They are 27th in 3-point attempt rate. Is that going to change, Laz? And does it need to change?
With the current roster, no, that is not going to change. Will the roster change in a way that elevates those numbers? Maybe. We'll see. But for now, like again, when you talk about if you're going to talk about the positives of the style they played defensively, part of that is a lot of those guys are not as productive from the 3-point line and don't want to be stationed out at the 3-point line all the time. That's not how they play their games. And so like that's the other side of the coin, right?
I agree. I don't think the 3-point attempt rate, I don't think it can with the current roster. I've been banging this door about Duncan Robinson before the season even started, and it's kind of shown itself thus far.
Those like 3 games, those like 2 games he missed, dude, it was very noticeable.
Yeah.
O2, does this change barring a roster change?
No, that's not going to change barring a roster change. That's just not how they play. Like even Cade is not a guy who's just like, I'm going to go out and shoot 10 threes. He shoots the threes that are given to him, but he almost always is looking to operate on the interior and inside. And that's just his game. I mean, I don't think there's anything you necessarily need to do with that per se. Like J.I. coming back, maybe that helps a little bit. But yeah, like last year you had Bees and Tim Hardaway Jr. who accounted for like more than half of your attempts and makes. And you knew coming into this year that it was going to be different. And that's just the flip side of it. I don't think that's going to change too much.
I agree. Last one, turnovers per game are 27th. I will say turnover percentage is 22nd. So not quite as bad, but still, bottom 10, with both of those numbers. Do we think that that's who this team really is? Is that going to stay there, Laz?
That sounds about right to me. So you would hope that I'm wrong and that both like Karis LeVert and Jaden Ivey get a little bit more consistency from a ball handling perspective in their minutes. But yeah, like this team, Cade's turning the ball over like at his like normal rate, a rate we're fine with. We talked a little bit about Duren's turnovers, but there's nobody else who I really think like needs to be like touching the ball a whole lot. And that is a recipe for like a more turnover prone team in my mind.
Omari, your thoughts?
Yeah. Also just a roster makeup type deal where, losing Dennis Schroeder, somebody, you're going to fill guys in for those, 12 odd minutes where the ball's not in Cade's hands. And, probably going to be more turnover prone in those spurts. Cade, also his turnovers are down, but he's still going to have the occasional game where he's got 7 or 8. Just kind of the nature of the beast. I think when you have the ball that much, you actually do that much. So, no, unless you make some sort of roster move, I think that's just going to be the MO for this team. They force a lot of turnovers, but they also turn the ball over themselves a good amount. And more often than not, it still works out in their favor.
The other thing I'll say is like if you play fast in transition, like you're going to turn the ball over a little bit.
Get you out on this just kind of topic, Laz. So Colin would ask, do we think JB is going to shorten the rotation soon? If so, whose minutes will be reduced the most? Double down with Michael Laz's thoughts on starting lineups once Ivy is healthy. I mean, I think just in general, we've had the rotation conversation. I've given my thoughts. O2 has given his thoughts. Let's just say this team is fully healthy. I've seen some people ask about Marcus Sasser. Kind of, I guess, what is your starting lineup when healthy? And then like, are you a 10-man rotation person? Are you okay with a 12-plus rotation in the regular season? Where do you kind of land on all of this and where everybody slots in?
Yeah, so I think the starting lineup is good as is. The only change you'd think about is like Ivy for Duncan, but you can't not start Asar because he's core to the identity of your team. You can't not start Tobias Harris because if you like did that for downsizing, all of a sudden like Asar is playing the 4 and you got like a 3-guard lineup out there in the starting lineup like that. Again, like that's not the identity of this team. And so I think that like, yeah, the starting lineup is probably going to stay where it is. Like what that means is in my mind, you're probably going to see less of Dennis Jenkins just because like he is on the 2-way. I really like the way he's played this year. I really appreciated like what he's brought to this team from like, again, like as a guy who takes care of the ball, can make good decisions. The shot making has gone like up and down, but again, like he's a 2-way guy. So like, that's fine. But like, he's probably the first guy like out. And then Javonte Green is the other guy who his minutes become a lot more situational. It's like, hey, we need some energy. Like let get in there, Javonte, or things like that, rather than a guy who like consistently plays like 12 minutes a night. And so that should put you at like a 10-man rotation, barring any like Stu ejections or anything crazy where Paul Reed shows up and puts the Superman cape on and carries his team for 20 minutes somehow. But yeah, I think that like knocking Dennis and Javonte out of the rotation is probably the cleanest way to get you back to like 10.
Love it. All right. Laz, we appreciate you so much. Always great stuff whenever you join. Let people know what's going on, what you got going, where they can find anything you got going, Twitter, Blue Sky. I don't know, if you've made the jump on socials, if you're doing the two process thing or not. But yeah, I know people love your thoughts and opinions on the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah, you can still find me on Twitter /X at Last Chance. I've tried to be in the comments a little bit more at Detroit Bad Boys this year, but it's taken. I got out of practice of it a little bit, so I need to get back into practice there. But I still love the coverage at Detroit Bad Boys. I still love the community and the commentators over at Detroit Bad Boys. That's still some of the best place to like read other people's thoughts about what the Pistons are thinking at DetroitBadBoys.com. So still check that out.
Love it. O2, take it away, my guy.
Detroit Bad Boys has been like, I feel like a bedrock for like, on my Twitter for like a while. So definitely shout out to Detroit Bad Boys as far as that. Laz, always a pleasure having you on, man. We'll do it again soon, of course. Big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Dakota Avery Nichols. Big shout out to West Davenport, as always. And we'll talk to you all next week.